the diagnosis with cancer, pancreatic cancer, in stage 4, and started chemo right away. I went to MD Anderson in Houston and got second opinions down there, and then started chemotherapy here in South Carolina. And it just became obvious to me that I couldn't do both. I couldn't continue to work in the firm and handle all of that. Plus, I didn't know how long I had really to do that. So I had to immediately pivot and focus on preserving my life. That's what I had to stay focused on.
Welcome to Empowering Leadership, a podcast from Dorrier Underwood. Join us as we explore new perspectives on leadership and discover what it takes to be effective as a leader. Here's your host, Doug McVaden.
On this episode of Empowering Leadership, Michael S. Watson, the founder of Watson Tate Savory Architects, shares lessons learned about how to grow a small business and how his cancer diagnosis changed everything. Coming up. My guest today on the Empowering Leadership podcast is a longtime friend and former client of mine, Michael Watson, who was the founder and longtime principal of Watson Tate Savory Architects. And we'll just welcome Michael. It's good to see you.
Hey, good to see you, Doug. Thanks.
So we've got several places we could start. We originally met when you were making some decisions about the future of your firm, but where do we find you today?
The journey of the firm was tracking along with my life and my thoughts of one day getting out and doing something else. When I turned 70, I found out I had cancer. So things took a turn that I had not expected. So that's what I've been dealing with recently. But the firm has gone and continued to survive and to evolve. All those people are still working and doing great work.
Wow. So we've really got two stories to tell, don't we? We've got the life cycle of the business and the life cycle of the founder of the business, and you know, the unexpected turns that life takes.
That's right.
So obviously, for our listeners, you're doing well enough to do this interview, and this is not any kind of struggle for you right now. And maybe we'll get to talking about how you're doing right now.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Well, let's start though at the beginning, which is, I believe it was 2009, maybe something like that, 2008, maybe in that time frame. And we met when I was speaking at a conference up at Duke University. But you were coming to an inflection point in the business at that time. Is that a good way to put it?
Well, that was the time of the recession where everybody was having to rethink how they were doing business and were they going to be able to keep their people or not. And I think the topic of your talk was how do I tell people what the position of the business is, or if I have to let them go, how do I tell them and treat them in a respectful way and that sort of thing, which is a very good talk.
Yeah. It hit home at the time, right, for you?
Yeah, exactly.
And so what was the impetus to start working with Dorrier Underwood at that time with your leaders, other than just the economic situation?
Well, the firm had started back in 1988, I believe, when my other partner, Sanders Tate, began the firm with a friend of his who unexpectedly passed away at 45.
Wow.
And so he and I got together, started in 1991. And so we've been working for a while together, and then brought Tom Savory in when he moved back to Columbia from New York. And I guess we had built a reputation. Our goal, our work focus had been on higher education and public sector work, but a lot of college and university work and technical college work.
Right. You can't go far in South Carolina without running into a Watson Tate Savory project from the 80s and 90s, right? I mean,
That's right.
There's a lot of University of South Carolina, various campuses out in Beaufort, and those technical college of the Low Country, I believe, is another one.
That's right.
But, I won't make you tout your accomplishments, but anybody who knows anything about higher education architecture in South Carolina knows of your firm.
And then because we like that type of work, and we liked working with campuses and doing the variety of work that they do, we felt like it was better to try to expand our work area instead of expanding the project types that we do. So instead of doing K through 12, for example, we decided to open an office in Charlotte and pursue work in North Carolina, which were a lot more and sometimes better opportunities there than South Carolina during the down times anyway. So we had the Charlotte office starting at that time.
As I recall, that's a pretty big challenge for an architecture firm to break into a new territory, especially in the higher education world, where it's kind of a closed system where they work with whom they work.
That's right.
You get into that clique, so to speak. Isn't that what you had to deal with?
Yeah, and these people are spending other people's money, taxpayers' money, and they don't want to take a chance on a new firm that they don't know can perform properly. So you can understand how that could happen naturally. And they're not just one or two firms. They had several firms that they work with in most of those campuses. So they had plenty of firms to choose from that they had worked with before. So our challenge was to get in and get a small project or two and show them how we worked and prove then basically what we did in South Carolina as a new firm, as a young firm here, and then repeated it up there, and a little bit more from a distance, so a little harder logistically, but not that far away. So we got our foot in the door in several places and were able to repeat the success that we had in South Carolina and North Carolina.
And I know that you, because you approached me and talked with me about what Dorrier Underwood does, that you thought that it was important to develop your emerging leaders within the firm as part of that approach. So talk about that, because, it's very common for a company to think, well, if you don't have the competencies with your people, you need to hire new people. You need to go find new people. Yeah. And you consciously took a slightly different path, right?
Well, we had two things. One was to grow the firm. In order to have enough momentum in the firm and to be able to do larger work, we had to show that we had the manpower, the bench to service it, and then also was to bring the people that had been working with us for a long time, bring them forward and give them more responsibilities in running the firm and getting the work and doing the work. And so yeah, that part of it was we had 2 or 3 people who had been with us for 10 years or more, and we naturally had brought them along, but I think we knew that we probably had not pushed them as hard to get out in front of us, because we were still doing what we did, and that was doing the marketing and business development of the firm. And we saw that that wasn't going to last forever, so we needed these people to step forward, but we'd never asked them to do that before. And so how do we do that, and how do we train ourselves to to look to them for what we needed, and so that was what the situation we were in at that point.
Yeah, and as I recall, the work was twofold, as you just described. It's both working with people to think of something like business development as part of their job that they previously thought, well, I just work on the projects. I'll do a good job on what you bring to me, but I'm not out there thinking what I'm going to bring, right? And that's a mindset shift. But then you also had to deal with, as owners, that the reason they had that previous mindset was because of you. I mean, you're the ones that gave them that initial mindset. So unless you had a different relationship to them or how you talk to them, it wasn't going to happen. Like, they weren't just going to suddenly change sitting over there at their desks.
That's right.
They were part of a system. So
what they also didn't realize was that by doing a good job on each project for the client was actually business development.
Yes.
It's actually what brought the client back, because they said, we really like the way he ran our project, and we want him to run this project, that kind of thing. So they had more going for them than they probably realized. So,
well, I think that's a fundamental realization that people in a lot of different industries have, that delivering your product or delivering your service is the sales conversation.
That's right.
That people divorce it in their minds and think, well, now I got to have some sales conversation. Well, not really, right? I mean, because you're already talking about what you do and how you do it and what the importance of it is the whole time you're delivering it.
Exactly. And a lot of times you're actually doing feasibility studies for them to help them set budgets and goals and programs for projects in the future. So, that's your future work right there.
That they can hire you to do.
Yeah, they could. Yeah.
Yeah, they could. Yeah.
So if you present yourself properly and realize that you have that opportunity, then you don't have to really sell. You can just be a professional and naturally grow into it.
Yeah, and I think what you just said is not something you're saying about architecture. It's what you're saying that about business and having a business, that whatever your product is, right? You're not saying it for your industry only.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So, well, let's talk about a couple of the projects for a minute that you were recognized for, because I know that you had through the history of the firm, you had a number of award-winning projects, but I'd like for you to take a little tangent for a minute and just tell us about one. Tell us about one that was special or satisfying for a unique way, or in a unique way.
Could I tell you about two?
Okay, yeah, you sure could.
So the one that comes to mind first is that you mentioned USC Beaufort, which was a branch campus of the USC system down in Beaufort, and they had a historical campus in Beaufort. But all of the growth was south of Beaufort in Bluffton and the Hilton Head area. And they wanted to capture that growth of their area and serve it. And so they got the power company gave them land, gave them like 80 acres or 100 acres to build a campus on, for a sort of a branch of a branch. And
so not in Beaufort.
Not in Beaufort. It was in addition to the Beaufort campus.
Wow. And
it's 30 miles away from Beaufort, so it could operate as a separate campus. And the whole firm, all the principals worked on the project to get ready for the interview. And in the state, they all do pre-qualifications with your experience. They pre-qualify you to interview, and then they have an in-person interview, and then they make a selection, and then they negotiate a fee. They can't negotiate a fee with the first firm. They can always go to the second firm and negotiate. So, but they basically select you and negotiate it that way.
So you had to do all the pre-qualifications, was something you had to work on as a submittal and send in prior to
Right.
even get in, and that determines whether you get the in-person interview. So the in-person interview is not even on the table to begin with.
That's right. So we did get shortlisted and got the interview. It was a very political project because there were a lot of other governments, the county and the two counties were contributing money to this project, and the state as well. So we went into the interview. There were a lot of people there, and we had worked on it and came up with some ideas for the new campus. They already had a master plan and a feasibility study, and we just plugged in our ideas into what they already had and showed how we could get the right image and the right mix of project types. The first three buildings to be done. So it was three projects in one.
Wow.
And the main administration and classroom building, and then a science building, and then finally a library building. And so we in the past, we had done some big projects for the university, but we'd always teamed up with a national firm and in some of the bigger projects. And in this case, we felt like we had a good enough sense of the work and connection to the university that we pursued it on our own.
Wow.
without a national firm. And the chancellor was sort of blown away by our presentation.
Really?
And it was phenomenal. When we got done, the director of facilities walked out in the hall and said, could you wait downstairs for a minute? We want to talk to you. And that never happened to us before.
That never happens. Everybody goes away and waits to hear till later.
Yeah, then they call you up 2 weeks later and say, congratulations, or,
Or condolences.
Yeah, right. So that was, and they were in a hurry. They had to get it done. But they had to get the first building open for this new season. So they were on a tight schedule. And I said, sure. So I spent the night there, and we got the project going, and that really sort of catapulted our firm forward.
Wow. And so did you get all three buildings as one project, as
all
one
three
approval?
buildings. Yeah.
Wow. And that was a go for by you guys to do it that way. Like you went for it to put three.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and so why were they blown away? Just give me more texture to that. What would she say blown away?
Well, because she had an idea of what the project, and I had talked to her briefly about what her goals were for the project, for the image, the architectural image of the project to be. And I think we just hit that nail right on the head. And
so it was like she saw her vision realized is what she was blown away. Not like, oh, I never thought of anything like that. It's more like, that's exactly what I was looking for.
That's right.
Okay. Wow. So it's like you guys really practiced listening.
Yeah. That's right.
And I think that's the other thing I want to ask you about is that when people talk about business development, I think they think that means they're going to do a lot of talking.
Yeah.
Because people want to do business development for me, say, well, what am I going to say?
Yeah.
And I want to know what to say.
Yeah.
So respond to that.
Well, I think the important thing is the questions that you ask. So you ask questions, and then you listen carefully for the answers. And we talked about that a lot as far as what information I had gathered and how we would respond to it and what we proposed.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't that you went away and had this private brainstorm and came up with this magnificent drawing of a building from your imagination. It's more that you listened carefully to what she said and gave her something that reflected back to her. She had never seen her own imagination drawn.
She hadn't seen it until that point. That's right.
Yeah. And so that's almost more magical. Like it's more magical for you to be able to draw what I'm thinking is more magical than for you to be able to draw what you're thinking.
That's right.
Because of course you can draw that, but if you draw what I said, that would be something. Okay, I get it. I'd be blown away.
You can draw that, but you can draw what you're thinking, but I can't hire myself.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So the other example I was going to tell you was the North Carolina example, where as we were trying to make our footprint in North Carolina,
I remember.
There was an old dining hall at Western Carolina University called Brown Dining Hall, and it had been sitting there empty or underutilized for several years. Wow. Not as a dining hall; it had been closed up, and it smelled bad and it looked bad. And,
wow!
It was a beautiful site. It's set up on the mountain, and
that whole campus is like a national park over there, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And in this case, we found out what they wanted to do with it, but we didn't have a sense of what their goals were as much as we did on the one in Beaufort. But we did see the potential for it immediately. And so even though we didn't hear the same things, we were listening in a way that we knew it was something they wanted to be an anchor for that side of campus and be a draw for the students to come and hang out. And they said more than just a dining hall, they wanted it to be a hangout place for the students where you happen to eat. So they didn't want it to look like a dining hall necessarily. They wanted it to look like just a fun place to hang out. So anyway, we presented those ideas, and what we didn't know was they had the interview. We got the interview, and they had the interview in Asheville, and they have a little branch campus there in a few programs, and we went there. And the reason they had the interview in Asheville was it was the Board of Trustees meeting that day in Asheville. And so
the Board of Trustees, that would be for the whole UNC system then, like also.
No, their Board of Trustees for
just for Western Carolina. Just for Western Carolina.
Yeah.
But still, big deal, a big meeting.
Right. Yeah, so they had their meeting, and we had no idea. So we went in for the interview, and then all of a sudden these people started pouring into our interview meeting room. And as it turns out, it was the whole Board of Trustees came to the interview. There were like about 25 people.
Wow.
And
another thing that never happens. That's another thing that never happens, right?
That's right, exactly. And we just we felt so good about what we had done and in our presentation, and we had, I don't know, we just like loosened up and had a good time presenting it. And we had our engineers there, and they did really well, and all of the principals of the firm and the people that had worked on the preliminary work that we presented were there. And
so is that another case you brought all the principals of the firm? All three principals showed up for that?
Maybe just two of them for that one. There was sometimes we took all three. Yes.
I'm just asking because I think it's probably unusual in architecture. Usually one principal goes, or maybe even not one of the principals.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So
but
I think it distinguishes you guys. I think that's part of what was unique about Watson Tate Savory is that you showed up like everybody's on this project.
Yeah. And that's the way it was in the office too. Everybody got a chance to talk about it and critique it and participate in the process. So there was no example of, well, that's not your department, or you're not on that project, or why are you talking? That's not your job. You didn't have that. You didn't have that. No, we tried to promote a one studio approach to it.
Like a Watson Tate Savory project is a Watson Tate Savory project, period. That just means we're throwing whatever resources. It doesn't mean everybody in the firm has to be working on every project, but they could.
Exactly. And as a smaller firm, you can do that. You can do that much easier too.
You had what, about 15 people?
Yeah. Right. So anyway, at the end of that interview, they all stood up and clapped for us.
Wow.
And we were blown away by that. And then we got the phone call a couple of days later and that we were successful. So.
Well, that's exciting. First, the chancellor in South Carolina is blown away. The second time, you all are blown away by the response of the trustees. So that's very exciting. Well, that I know from working with Jana Hartenstein, who I'll call out by name, that was a big project that she worked on for a number of years after that, and it was very successful.
That's right.
And now it probably doesn't smell bad, and it doesn't seem like a cafeteria. It seems like a cool hangout spot that also you can get food.
Yeah,
right?
and you can look out and see the mountains from the patio on the roof. So,
wow. So it's a real destination now on campus. It'd be a destination.
Exactly. Yeah.
Isn't that exciting? That's very exciting. So that's an example of your work. And then, so you're trucking along with the firm. You've expanded into North Carolina, and you've developed some of the leaders in the associates and have become junior partners now. And then you get this news.
And you know that saying that we make plans and God laughs.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's sort of what happened to me. And that I had the diagnosis with cancer, pancreatic cancer, in stage 4, and started chemo right away. I went to MD Anderson in Houston and got second opinions down there, and then started chemotherapy here in South Carolina. And it just became obvious to me that I couldn't do both. I couldn't continue to work in the firm and handle all of that. Plus, I didn't know how long I had really to do that. So I had to immediately pivot and focus on preserving my life. That's what I had to stay focused on.
That became your job.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Almost like on a dime, I had to pivot to do that. And
well, do you want to say a few things about what you dealt with in the business and how you turned that over?
We had talked about selling the firm to a larger firm and not trying to merge it with a firm, but just to sell the firm and maintain our office, hopefully, and maintain our staff and be a contributor to a larger firm. And so we had been in discussions with several firms at that point before my diagnosis. One had turned out to be looked pretty promising. We were going down the road in that direction. And so then when this happened to me, it made it even more imperative to get that settled and get everybody on board and see if we could make it work. And that's what we did. We actually sold the firm to a larger firm. It's about 300, a little under 300 people and they had pretty much done what the same route we had taken, except they had done it in a broader sense, doing more private sector work and retail and other things that had allowed them to grow larger. Whereas we had stayed focused on a narrower type of projects and had been somewhat limited in our ability to grow for growth's sake. And that was fine because, there's good growth and then there's bad growth. So that they had been very successful but they had not done as much higher education as we had, and they did not have an office in Columbia. It worked out to where we became their Columbia office. And
well, let's go ahead and say the name of the firm since we're promoting them.
McMillan Passon Smith, which started in Greenville, and then they merged with a firm in Spartanburg, Passon Smith. So it became McMillan Smith became McMillan Passon Smith, and then they had bought firms, sort of like taking over our firm. They had bought firms before in Charleston, and they had an office in Atlanta and an office in Charlotte, office in Asheville. So,
well, it's interesting. So that there's a full circle. We really are able to talk about the full life cycle of the business. And so back to you, what are you doing talking to me with stage 4 pancreatic cancer diagnosis? Because that, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of our listeners. They were thinking, did he say that? Because that's usually not someone who you're talking to after a while.
That's right. And I talked to the doctor in Houston and I said, how long do I have? And he said, and doctors don't like that question because they don't want to be put in that position. He said, honestly, Mr. Watson, you've lived longer than most people at the stage you're in right now.
This was your initial diagnosis?
Yeah.
He was already saying you're past the point. We expected to have lost you from this by now.
That's right.
Well, when was that?
A little bit. It was several months later after the initial diagnosis, but not that far.
Well, when was that conversation?
2020, probably early 2021.
Yeah. So it's been a year and a half.
Year and a half, yeah.
About a year and a half since then.
Yeah.
Well, now, of course, you've got to tell us what you've been doing and engaged with, because that's a remarkable thing that you just said.
Yeah. So I can't speak to how I've done as far as healing goes. The chemotherapy obviously worked, but I went through three treatments, 3 types of chemo.
3 rounds of chemo or 3
No,
types?
3 types. Yeah.
And then rounds with those.
Yes. Over that year and a half, I went through 3 or 4 different types of chemo. And then when they became less successful in pushing it back, they would switch me to another one. So cancer is a really daunting problem, and you don't have to be around it long to see how difficult it is to understand it, to know what your options are, and to see a path. I didn't shy away from getting second opinions, and my doctor here in Columbia was very open and supportive of that. And he actually recommended that I go up to Duke this year. So I went up there and talked to the doctor, and he said, well, there is a blood test that we can do, and we might be able to get you approved for another type of treatment besides chemo. And so they did the test. It was just an easy blood test, and sent it off to California. And sure enough, one of the enzymes that came back gave them a track on it. And they said I would be a candidate for immunotherapy, which is, where the infusion, the immunoinfusion tags your cancer blood cells so that your own body white blood cells can identify them. So that's how cancer grows. It gets in under the radar and can't be identified. So this immunotherapy identifies those cells, and then the white blood cells can go after them.
So you've got some sounds like aggressive chemotherapy that you pursued that was successful, and then now you have immunotherapy that's underway that supports your immune system and as you described, tags the cancer cells so your white blood cells can be effective. It's kind of a remarkable comeback, story from this. But you also haven't said anything about where you just went to California to this Commonweal Center, which I've got to think is also a big part of your healing and your response to this disease.
Right. Well, Commonweal is a cancer healing center that was started about almost 50 years ago by Michael Lerner in Bolinas, California, right north of the San Francisco Bay Area on Marin County, over on the coast, on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And it's got a great little campus there that's part of a state park, actually. And so it's just a magnificent setting. When I first got this, when I would go to Texas to MD Anderson, I had a friend there whose husband became a good friend as well. And he had 2 wives die of cancer before he married my friend. And he had taken both of them to this place in California called Commonweal, and he recommended that I get in touch with him. So I did get in touch with them, and they said, well, we're not doing in-person sessions during the COVID. But we are trying out online sessions. So they put a group of 6 of us together, and they have a staff. Well, when we were there, and then later on in the last 2 weeks, we were out there and actually did an in-person session. But my introduction to it had been on Zoom,
Okay.
and I had met some incredible people on their staff, like therapists and a yoga teacher and just guides for life that were working in their program.
Well, you're clearly not advocating it as an alternative to medical treatment. So
No.
I don't hear that, but I do hear it as an integral part of what is happening with you right now in your life. So there's something else you can share about the approach.
So anyway, we decided, my wife and I decided, and she's sort of become in the role of a caregiver and has many frustrations with me and how I'm acting sometimes. And so I said, why don't you go with me and we'll go to Commonweal and then we can talk about it. And it was really fantastic. They had it all set up to where you got there and you felt immediately comfortable and taken care of. When you got out of the car, they came running out and grabbed your bags and took them up to your room. The staff people did. And we had a therapist that did group therapy with everybody, and then we did individual therapy sessions with them. And we had massages, and we had sand tray exercise. We had other sessions about death and dying and things like that. And it just made you feel like this is something that you can get your arms around and understand it better as far as how it impacts your life. And Michael had written this book about choices in healing, and he looks at the whole aspect of cancer, and not just the doctors and the medicine, but the environment and what your body's going through, and food is so important to how your body responds and fights this off. And then mentally, how you handle it and how you handle it around your family and around your friends. So there was a couple of things I wanted to share with you.
Please.
In his book, one about the spiritual approaches to cancer. And it starts out with, cancer means facing the certainty of illness, the probability of pain, the possibility of death. For many people, these encounters evoke profound shifts in consciousness that may be called spiritual. For others who may never have considered the possibility they have that they have a spiritual nature, the encounter with these deep shifts in consciousness bring them to unknown territory, and they may have had no previous reason to sort out the differences between religion, which they may have had difficulties with, and personal spirituality. They may not have considered the relationship between spirituality and opportunities for healing, and they may not have considered how spirituality is often evoked, sometimes for the first time, by a deep wound such as cancer. And an interesting aspect of that, talking about having a deep wound, Carl Jung, he says, considered shamans to be representative of one of the greatest archetypes of the human experience. He called the archetype the, quote, wounded physician of Greek myth. It is his own hurt that gives the measure of his power to heal. The archetype now is widely known as the wounded healer. So if you've been hurt or come close to death, you're much more prepared to be able to help somebody else that's dealing with it now. And some Michael Lerner has had his bouts with tragedy, and I think it made him completely able to cope and help other people cope with what they were dealing with. One of the things he says that cancer is such a pervasive thing and can cause so much pain that the patient frequently is in so much distress from symptoms and side effects of medical treatment that he has lost almost all or most of his desire to live and the energy to go on. So you just get beaten down by it, and you can't have a rational thought about how you should live. And he said, it took me some time after I started counseling people with cancer to realize that cancer is not always experienced as the greatest problem facing a person with cancer. Someone may be carrying a greater pain than cancer, such as the death of a spouse, a divorce, a child trauma, the loss of a job, or some other issue that takes more time and energy to deal with than what might appear on the outside world to be the central life issue, cancer. So on top of cancer, life goes on, and you can have things that are happening to you that are just exponentially piling on to your ability to cope. And so that's one of the things I think they do really well there, is they try to help you talk about and sort out the things that are going on in your life so that you can be at ease, get past those, and then you can deal with the cancer better. So it was just a phenomenal week. You get refocused pretty quickly.
Yeah, I can hear it. And I really appreciate your taking us through that, because the thing you're modeling right now is being able to have cancer rather than cancer has you.
Yeah.
And you're now at the mercy, and you're just a victim, and you can just barely get through every day. You're actually able to contribute your wisdom in this format. And I can definitely hear in your firm that you had enough wherewithal to worry about the future of the people in your firm that you had invested your whole life in building, to see that it would be just as important to make sure that gets healed, so to speak, as yourself getting healed, but they aren't mutually exclusive. Maybe to say it that way, like you've got to do both. Like you wouldn't be all right, obviously, if you didn't take care of yourself, but in a larger sense, you wouldn't be all right if you didn't take care of your firm.
Yeah. And one doctor said to me is that you need to be thinking about what your next step is, because the one you're in now is probably going to not work for forever. Right. And you need to be prepared for that and be thinking about what you would do. So that's Commonweal gave me that perspective on how to think about what you're going through right now in order to be able to think about what you might have to do in the future to cope with it. And when you say it, it's evident that doesn't apply only to people with cancer. That's right. It's a job for all of us. Well, and especially in business, if you need to think about what the next play is in order to be ready for it. Because if you're not ready for it, you haven't prepared for it, you'll miss an opportunity, right? So, well, I'm certainly taking that to heart. This has become very useful for me, because now I've got your words of wisdom as I grow and think about the future for Dorrier Underwood. And I would just want to say I'm really hoping that other people listening to this have had the same experience that I have, which is that I really feel like you've given us the wisdom of a lifetime that you've earned. It's not something you just read or learned somewhere, but you earned. So because it's all coming from your experiences, not the concept about your experiences. And nobody hands you the answers to those questions. You have to figure out for you how to best deal with it. Yeah. There's no template, is there? No. I think Michael's book, as far as cancer goes, is very good, and the Commonweal is very good. Has been a good resource for me too. What's the name of the book? Choices in Healing, by Michael Lerner. Lerner. Thank you for that. Choices in Healing. Yeah. All right, Michael. Thank you. Thank you for who you're being in the world and for spending this time with us. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you for listening to Empowering Leadership. If you enjoyed this episode, take a moment to subscribe for free on your favorite podcast platform. Give us a rating and a review so that other leaders like yourself can find us. Sign up for Dorrier Underwood's email newsletter by visiting us at dorrierunderwood.com. Dorrier Underwood serves visionary companies who are serious about realizing their dreams and who are unwilling to settle for incremental results. Our clients are looking for breakthrough results and a deeper sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. To learn more, visit us at dorrierunderwood.com. That's it for now. Go forth and be amazing and take good care of your people. Empowering Leadership is produced by Dorrier Underwood and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.